Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingracia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I'm really glad that you can be with me today, and I'm very excited about this episode because we have back Keely Reason for part 2 of Spice It Up. We've been talking about specifically how to have an awesome Valentine's Day, and the fact is that the day that this episode is airing for the very first time is February 14th. It is Valentine's Day, and that's why I invited Keely on to kind of share some ideas with us. I recognize, as I mentioned in our previous episode, that a whole lot of people will be listening to this episode, and it won't be February 14th. It might be November or July or whatever. But I think the ideas that we're talking about would apply to healthy relationship, healthy marriage, healthy sex and marriage, any time of the year. So whether it's Valentine's Day or not, I think the episode's worth listening to. But Keely, welcome back. Thanks for coming back and being with us for part 2.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Right. I really enjoyed our discussion last week, and I think we touched on a lot of really good things. And I'm looking forward to continue our discussion today. And I thought I might start by just maybe asking you if you would have some ideas about specifics on Valentine's Day. I ended the last episode by kind of mentioning that I believe the largest part of my audience is men. I know a lot of women listen to the podcast, and I appreciate that. But sometimes us guys, we don't always think ahead. Sometimes we're kind of thick. We're kind of like Bam Bam on the Flintstones, So we need like some inspiration, and we need some ideas, and we need to be pointed in a good direction. And I appreciate that you're a female and you think about this stuff, and you devote a lot of your time, energy, effort to these things, and you're good at it. So could you maybe just be creative, think out loud, give us some ideas. How do us guys need to be thinking about this? How do we move toward our wives? How do we be creative? Do you have some specific ideas that you might suggest that you think the average woman would really appreciate and respond to? What would be some ideas for us guys that we could initiate that would just help our wives maybe have a really special day?
Well, a couple of things to really keep in mind is that every wife is different. And so you really do need to know your wife. You need to know what she expects, what she considers to be romantic.
That makes sense.
Where she is, what her needs are. So having conversations ahead of time is very beneficial to help you kind of get an idea. What is it that she needs and wants? And I'm going to tell you, if you are a man listening to the podcast today, your wife really just needs your attention. Above and beyond anything else, she wants you to give her attention. And not just sexual attention, but before you get to that place, she wants you to connect with her emotionally and mentally, and be a friend to her and a helper. And then she wants you to pursue her sexually. If you go straight into sexual pursuit, she's going to just be really turned off by that. But if you can come in and be a servant to her and a friend to her and romance her in those ways, then she is going to be very ready and excited to have the sexual, interaction with you later on. And if you're trying to come up with things to do on Valentine's, I think you can't just be like, well, we're going to go have sex and that'll be the end of it. You should be ready to prepare a few hours worth of time with your wife.
Wow. That is so good. I love it. I feel like what you're talking about is the concept of cultivating an environment, a relational environment, an emotional environment, a spiritual environment, and then an environment that's conducive to physical and sexual intimacy. Sometimes I see in pictures, and the picture I'm seeing right now is a greenhouse, So what is the purpose of a greenhouse? You can take seeds, and it could be literally 17 degrees outside in the Midwest or up north, But if you have a greenhouse, you're able to regulate the temperature inside that greenhouse, and you can therefore plant plants. You could plant strawberries in the middle of January or February, and they could grow and they could prosper because in the greenhouse you create an environment that's conducive to growth. So I feel like as husbands, if we're smart husbands, we're going to almost like try to create a greenhouse that's conducive to love so that our marriage can prosper, where there's this relational warmth, this emotional warmth and spiritual warmth that's conducive to successful relationship. And if a guy waits until the morning of February 14th to start thinking about Valentine's Day and what, should I do something? Dude, you probably waited too long,
Right. And if you're listening to this podcast today because you're like, shoot, it's Valentine's, I have to come up with something tonight, you can always just postpone what you do with your wife to the weekend.
There you go. And also, you could just start working on next Valentine's Day. That'd give you 365 days to work on the greenhouse, right? But the bigger point is just to be aware of the fact that, well, you said, Keely, your wife wants attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes I think that husbands think that their wives don't want sexual attention, but it's probably because they bypassed everything else she needs to get to that place. Men are so much more like, run by their wife and grab their boob. And to them, that's so sexy. If she were to do that to him and run by and grab him,
Yeah.
He would be like, yes. But a woman is like, seriously, they're not toys. No, she doesn't have a problem with you touching her boobs if you have worked your way up to that. If you started by kissing her neck or giving her a hug or, feeding her a piece of chocolate, she'd probably be absolutely fine with you touching her.
Or maybe doing the dishes or sweeping the kitchen floor, huh?
Something.
Right.
Yes, women definitely need to connect mentally and emotionally.
Now the picture I'm seeing is priming the pump. Those old pump wells? You start pumping and pumping and pumping, but the water doesn't come out for a while. So they used to have to prime it. So you get a bucket of water and you pour it down the spout, and somehow that primes it. Like you got to put something in, and then something starts coming out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So where do we go from there, Keely? We're establishing that it's important to create this environment that's conducive to successful and intimate relationship. Pay attention to your wife. Make her know that she's special to you. Spend time with her. Demonstrate kindnesses to her. And all these things are going to begin to cultivate this kind of relational warmth that makes it possible for the flower of sexual intimacy to grow.
Exactly.
Assuming that a guy's been working on this a little bit and been investing in a reasonable way in his relationship, do you have some ideas then about Valentine's Day? And do you have like specific ideas or that you might recommend to guys or some suggestions?
Well, one of the things that I always suggest to couples is to rely on bedroom games for nights of romance, because a bedroom game is going to make you slow down. It's like, if you're going to play Monopoly, well, you're going to be playing it for an hour. So bedroom games really make you slow down. You're not just going straight to the finish line. It also gives you a script to work from, so nobody has to guess what needs to go next or happen next. You just, whatever the game tells you to do, you do it. And there are plenty of Christian bedroom games available to you. In fact, I have plenty on my website. They are the highest viewed post, every bedroom game I have, because people are looking for that. They are looking for something that will give them ideas and kind of do the work for them. Another good resource is the Dating Divas. They have all kinds of bedroom games and full date nights. They have tons of Valentine's Day date night printables, and you just go over there and you print it off, and boom, you have an idea.
Wow, that's great. The Dating Divas. Now, that is that just Google Dating Divas and you find their website?
If you just go thedatingdivas.com, they are a big website. They will come right up. And they've got full date night ideas and printables. I mean, everything down to menu planning if you wanted. And they've got romantic nights. They've got sexy nights. And they've been a huge inspiration to me on Love Hip Adventure. It's the reason I started making bedroom games. The first bedroom game Austin and I played, I was really surprised at how awesome it was, because I would have said, we have a pretty good sex life and I'm really satisfied. But the first bedroom game we played, we were like, where has this been our whole relationship? And it took our sex life to the next level, and I didn't even know that was possible. Like, I didn't even know that there was something else after what we were already experiencing.
Wow.
So I always suggest to people, hey, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of us out there that we are spending our time making it happen, so you don't have to. All you have to do is just show up.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. And by the way, you have created, how many bedroom games have you created?
I currently have probably 7, and I'm working on another one that I plan to release called Love or May I. And we are just backlogged on the amount of things that we are creating. But that one will be awesome. The next bedroom game that we release. And that bedroom game will be helping a couple establish a bedroom language so that they name each other's body parts and sex acts in words that they feel good about and can help them feel, hot. And then there will be a game that goes along with that. But that worksheet already exists. The bedroom language worksheet already exists.
Right. I ordered that from your website.
Oh, did you?
I gave it to my wife, and we talked about it a little bit, and it was a helpful exercise. Because I think, the average couple, it's a little bit intimidating, and there's maybe a sense of embarrassment. Can I say this? What do I call this body part? What are you comfortable with? And try to, again, it goes back to what we were talking about in our last episode, the importance of communication,
right?
And just talking about it and establishing with one another what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to try, and you kind of learn from each other and give yourself permission to stretch your comfort zone a little bit. So, I would recommend that. You guys definitely go to Keely's websites. Which website are the sex games on, Keely? Love, Hope, Adventure, or IamTheSexTalkLady.com?
If you want to go to lovehopeadventure.com/bedroom games, I think it's bedroom-games. Most of them are linked up there, but I also have an Etsy shop where you can access all of my printables there. It just is the best way to keep them organized. And I'm Love Hope Adventure on Etsy. So I think, okay. But I do have these bedroom games are linked on Love Hope Adventure on that page, bedroom-games. .com. So you should be able to find them that way, or just like Google, like in my search on Love Hip Adventure, if you said bedroom games, it would pull them all up. It would either pull up the main page or whatever I've currently got. And when it comes down to bedroom languages, that is insanely practical, because you don't want to feel like a 7th grader laughing if your spouse says, "Can I do this?" That kills the mood and wrecks their confidence. And at the same time, you don't want to feel shame. So that actually is another really good idea for a Valentine's Day date night type of thing, is to just talk about sex and have romantic conversations, which can be kind of difficult to guide through if you are not typically talking about sex, like if that's not something you typically do. So Austin and I have written tons and tons and tons of questions to help people talk about sex, because I'm surprised at the number of couples who never speak to one another about this thing that they should be doing and probably are.
Right.
It's just so crazy to me.
I might be wrong, but I suspect that is very, very common. There might even be more couples who would struggle with it and don't know how to do it and aren't comfortable talking about sex than couples who can talk about sex.
Right. And I encourage couples to figure out how to talk about sex with each other, because if you can't talk about sex with one another, how will you talk with your kids about sex? I mean, you've got to be comfortable with one another so that you can have those conversations with your children.
Right. Where on your website, you said you and Austin have written tons of questions that would help or facilitate a couple's conversation about sex. Where do we find those lists of questions?
I have recently released a book called Creative Conversation Starters for Couples. It's on Amazon. And there are 2 chapters at the end that are intimate questions. I also have a bedroom game called Sexy Truth or Dare. And the truth question are all questions. So it's asking questions like, hey, what is a sex position that you love? What do you like seeing me in? And I also have a couple of blog posts, which I can link to these blog posts on lovehopeadventure.com/Periscope. That's where I do all of because I do Periscope shows and Facebook Live shows, and that's where I link to all of my show mentions. So I can link to the articles that I've written about sexy questions to ask your spouse.
Okay. So where would a person go now then?
They can look for Truth or Dare on my website, and that's free. You just sign up for the newsletter. You get the free printable, and it will come to you, and those have a lot of questions. Or you can buy my conversation starter book on Amazon, Creative Conversation Starters for Couples.
Great.
And that has 2 chapters worth of intimate questions. And then like I said, I could just send you the links to the other sexy questions that I've created.
Okay. Yeah, if you do that, then I'll put them in the show notes with this episode.
I'll make a full page for you to make it easy, because I've realized Austin and I, we are very big on helping couples communicate, and we want people to communicate through their talking so that they can have a better sex life.
Great. That sounds totally awesome, and we would appreciate that. So when you were talking about the bedroom games, I guess we've spoken to it a little bit, but I thought to myself, I love the idea. I think it's a great idea, but I'm thinking that there might be some folks, maybe a lot of folks, that would literally be uncomfortable playing a bedroom game, maybe because they've never done it, maybe because they're in a place in their marriage where it just would be too new to them, too scary to them. They've never done it. Mm-hmm. So I guess, how would you speak to that? I have this idea that sometimes couples get into what I might call a sexual routine, where you end up doing the same things over and over and over and over again, because that's the way we do it. That's what we know. That's kind of our comfort zone. And there's this old adage that says, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, Mm-hmm. So I just think it's really important that couples consider the possibility of creativity, exploration, taking risk, being willing to try new things, being willing to be a little more playful, a little more creative. So you've never done a bedroom game before. I don't know. I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm insecure. I'm not sure. But how do people learn to stretch their limit? How do we rattle our own cage? How do we disrupt our old comfort zones to stretch, to grow?
Well, I mean, some of it is going to require you being willing to go out on a limb. Now, I think a lot of couples, or a lot of people don't talk about sex because they realize there are a lot of problems in their sex life. And I know that I don't know if husbands struggle with this as much as wives, but if a wife goes to the husband and says, what would you like for me to do sexually for you? I think she would feel very scared about what the answer would be.
Right.
And so for a wife in that situation, or a husband who has a wife in that situation, it would be better for them to say what they are willing to do. I would like to do this for you. Now, that means you have to figure out what you're going to be comfortable doing. If you're scared that your spouse is going to request something of you that you don't want to do, then you just have to come up with something. What would I be willing to do? What am I interested in doing? So Austin and I actually have created a few blank bedroom games so that people can customize them themselves. Yes, it requires more creativity. However, it allows them to customize it in such a way that they're not being asked to do things that they're not okay with. So, for example, I've had readers write into me and say that they love my bedroom game. It's getting hot in here. But we do a lot of oral sex cards and spaces on that game. And they say, we are nervous about oral sex. We don't really do it. How do you suggest we get interested in it? So what has done for them is, one, it's just allowed them to have the conversation. Now, maybe they're skipping that space, which it sounds like they probably were, but it did cause them to both get curious about it.
It put the idea on their radar.
Right. Like, they got to a space. Now, we always tell couples, hey, if we have something on here that you don't feel comfortable doing, skip it and go to the next thing. Because there's plenty of stuff on the bedroom game that's like massage your spouse and kiss for a minute. Things that people shouldn't be feeling too nervous to do. But yeah, we're going to push it on some of that. And that's why we make some of it customizable. But if you want to start branching out and you're scared that your spouse has ideas that you don't want to do, then you've got to come up with some things you're willing to do. That's going to require you doing your own research and creating. But when you have that power, it actually makes you more excited and more enthusiastic anyway when you've made the decision. So it can be very beneficial.
That's good. Keely, I was thinking just this idea that you kind of touched on it, that so many couples are just not really in a healthy place maybe in their marriage, and maybe specifically in the sexual aspect of their marriage. The fact is that there is a whole lot of weirdness around sex sometimes for people, and it implicates a lot. Sometimes it goes all the way into their family of origin, their religious upbringing, experiences, maybe bad experiences they had. People have had rapes, people have been sexually abused, people have had abortions, and people have had weird things happen in relationships, and people have body image issues. They don't feel good about themselves. They're not comfortable in their own skin. And for all these reasons, people kind of have hang-ups and insecurities, and that follows them into their marriage and then into the bedroom. And there's insecurity, and there's fear, and there's difficulty. I can't tell you, I mentioned Sherry and I have been married 33 years. The first half of our marriage was a total disaster. And for those who have heard our story, you know something about what I'm talking about. We are a living miracle, the fact that we're still together, that God brought us through. And at the epicenter of our crisis was the issue of sex. We could not connect on a sexual level. We would go months and months and months and months without sex. There was confusion and hurt and fear and mistrust and just all this weirdness. So a lot of people are in a place like this, And I guess maybe something that I would just like to say here is I just want to encourage people that if that's the kind of place that you're in your life right now, and in your marriage, and in the sexual aspect of your marriage, I just want to encourage you that I believe with all my heart that there is hope, there is healing, there is redemption, there are resources available. Sherry and I went to counseling, we read good books, we went to seminars. The point being, we were willing to try to work on the issues, and it was a messy process, and it was difficult. It was 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But we hung in there and we kept working on it, and we tried to talk about these things, and it was up and down and in and out and back and forth and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But over the years, we made progress. And I'm telling you, we're on a honeymoon now. It's remarkable what God has done for us. God has brought His light into the sexual area of our lives, His truth, His healing, His redemption. and we're able to connect with each other now more intimately, more vulnerably, more honestly, more playfully, we're present to one another. Sex is a wonderful, beautiful, awesome gift that God has created, and God intends for us to enjoy it. So I just want to encourage you that, in a sense, I feel like maybe these episodes around Valentine's Day could be really discouraging for some people that are in a bad place. Like, I wish I could enjoy it. I wish I could play a bedroom game with my wife or with my husband. I wish I could make my spouse a bubble bath. I wish we could, but we're just not in the place to be able to do that. So, Keely, how do we speak to folks that are maybe not in a very good place?
Well, first of all, the most important thing to realize and remember is that every single couple out there has sexual problems. I have yet to run into a couple who was like, we have had the best sex life from day one.
Wow, that's really good. That's important.
Every couple.
See, that inspires hope in me. Like, now I'm not a freak show. We're not so weird that everybody else is awesome and put together, but look at us, we're a mess. It's like everybody struggles with this stuff.
And that's one of the reasons. This has actually been a little bit of struggle for me at Love Hope Adventure, because I would not say that Austin and I have had a horrible marriage. We have had a lot of difficulties, like everyone, but it's just your normal run-of-the-mill struggles. But I often talk to marriage bloggers who had sexless marriages, their sex life nearly destroyed their marriage, or whatever the case may be. And I thought, well, gosh, what's my testimony going to be? Because I don't really have all that. However, even though I was raised in a great home, very sex-positive home, which I realize is not typical, and my parents talked to me about sex all the time, and I came into the marriage with a wonderful understanding of all of it. Even Austin and I had our sex problems. Even Austin and I really struggled with getting on the same page about the amount of times we were having sex and when we were having sex. And there was a lot of rejection and a lot of miscommunication. And I thought to myself one day, I feel like Austin and I came into the marriage highly prepared for a great sex life. And look at us, we were still screwed up. So
it takes time to work through these things, to figure it out, to communicate, to understand each other, accept each other. People, we live in a broken world, and it's inevitable that every single person has issues and has hurts and insecurities and these things. My goodness. It makes sense to me that these insecurities at the deepest level could manifest themselves on the sexual level. I think biblically, maybe that's what's intended in Genesis before the fall, when it says they were naked and they felt no shame. It's like they were literally able to be present to each other and naked with each other and sexual and be comfortable and not have hang-ups and have no shame. Could you imagine how wonderful that would be?
Be amazing.
It kind of assumes that after the fall, sin entered in the world. Now people are broken, so now we do have hurts and confusions and hang-ups and difficulties. So now I think that the normal template is that when we're naked together, we do feel shame. Mm-hmm. We feel confused and disoriented, and we don't know what to do, and we don't feel safe. And so it takes a while to, with God's help and mercy and grace, which are all incredibly powerful and healing and redemptive, that with God's help, He can help us come to the place where, the way I'd like to say it, God wants to move us back toward the garden, back toward His original design, where we can actually be naked with our spouse and not be shamed and actually enjoy one another the way God always intended it to be.
And you can get there, absolutely. You can get to that place, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of conversations, and a lot of healing.
Yes, it does. And Sherry and I are living proof. We've been married 33 years, and I am not kidding you when I say this. It took us right at about 30 years to get to our honeymoon.
Wow.
The first half of our marriage was a disaster. Then we went into this 6-year counseling process where we began to deal with all these root issues and hang-ups that we didn't even understand, that were literally sabotaging our marriage and our lives and who we could be together sexually. And so it does take work. And as we work through all that, and so, we were sexual the whole course of our marriage. It did happen. It's part of who we were, but I'm not sure that it was necessarily always real healthy. And I feel like when I say we got to our honeymoon, I kind of mean that metaphorically, but we've got to a place where we're just more comfortable and relaxed, and we enjoy each other, and it's wonderful. And just, I literally said to my wife this past week, I said, I wish we knew on our wedding night what we know now, what took us 30 years of God working in our hearts and lives. If we would have only known, we could have truly had a true honeymoon on our honeymoon night, But we didn't know how to do that because we were too much of a mess.
Yeah, honeymoons are kind of overrated for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people struggle in their marriage. It's so important that you recognize that you're not the only one, that everyone does that. And like you said, you and your wife got to the root of the issue. And sometimes, really, that's what you have to do in marriage. You have to recognize what is the root problem. And so if there is a sexless marriage, the husband may think that the problem is his wife is not interested in sex. Or maybe the wife thinks my husband is not interested in sex. Or maybe they think I'm fat and ugly or whatever. And the truth is the root problems really just lies within them or within something going on in the relationship. For Austin and me, for example, he felt that I was not that interested in sex. Well, yeah, I wasn't interested in sex at midnight. You're right. But if we had backed that clock up enough and I wasn't dog tired, then yeah, I'd have been more interested in sex. And so you have to figure out what's the root problem. And for a couple that's really struggling right now, my encouragement to you is to go ahead and start now. Maybe you're not going to have the best Valentine's this year and most romantic candlelit dinners and all this stuff, but you can really start initiating some very real heart-to-heart conversations. And don't ask these kinds of questions like that aren't specific. Well, they've got to be very specific questions. And if you really ask the right questions and start guiding a conversation, you will work through your problems.
That's really good, Keely. I like it. And maybe if I could throw in a piece of advice, I'm just thinking out loud, but for the couple that maybe isn't in the greatest place right now in their marriage, and maybe particularly in the sexual aspect of their marriage, there's this kind of assumed pressure on Valentine's Day. We're supposed to have sex, right? But maybe we haven't had sex for months. Maybe we're in a place where sex doesn't feel safe right now. We can't really participate with one another sexually and enjoy it and have a great experience. Well, give yourself permission, like you said, to keep it low key. Let the pressure be off. Maybe try to communicate with your spouse. And I'm thinking the most practical piece of advice I have is to consider the possibility of trying to make the day still be as special as it can possibly be without sex, assuming we're not in the place where we can have sex right now. Maybe write a card to your wife and say, my love, I know that we're not in the healthiest place in our lives and our hearts and our marriage right now. And we're struggling and we've had a lot of difficulty. And I know that I failed you in many ways. And it makes me sad that this is Valentine's Day and we can't really celebrate in the true spirit of Valentine's Day. We can't really even be physically intimate this year, but I just want you to know that that's my heart, that I look forward to the day when we can be intimate with each other. I look forward to what God's going to do as He heals our hearts and lives, and I want you to know that I intend to work on us, and I want to be a better man. And I'm glad you're my wife, and I'm committed to this thing. And I'm just thinking out loud, but whatever your heart would say to reach out to your spouse and let them know that they're important and that you do care and that you want it to get better. And then maybe consider the possibility, if you can't create this special day that's escalating toward this echelon of this awesome, incredible sexual experience, but what can you do? Maybe you guys can go out and have a quiet dinner together. Maybe you can take a walk. Maybe you could go for a bike ride. I don't know, whatever you would enjoy, but to try to still make it special, spend time together, turn toward one another, talk to each other, even if sex can't be part of it at this point in your life, that it doesn't mean that you can't still reach out toward your spouse and still try to do something special.
Well, I think that, if you can't focus on sex and sexual intimacy because you and your spouse are not in that place, you're not doing very well, then I think your focus really has to turn towards friendship and being your spouse's friend, because that will help your affection towards one another and help you get back to that place. But you just focus on being their friend. And I recognize that men are different kinds of friends with their guy friends, and girls are different with each other. But I would just encourage a husband to reach out to his wife and be a friend to her, similar to how her friends are to her, which would mean listen to her talk about her day. Don't try to problem solve it and fix it, but just listen and just be there and actively listen and say, yeah, that was really crappy that you went through that. And I'm really sorry to hear that. Because most women they want their husbands to be a friend to them. And if they're pushing back about sex, a lot of times it's because they don't feel like friends with their spouse.
That's really good, Keely, and it feels like what you're saying right there ties right back into what we were talking about a little bit ago when we were talking about that concept of the relational greenhouse, kind of working on cultivating a kind of relationship and friendship that's an environment that then becomes conducive to emotional intimacy and relational intimacy and verbal intimacy, and hopefully all of that will cascade then toward physical intimacy and sexual intimacy. So praise be to God. Keely, I see that we're over time, so we're going to have to bring this episode to a close here in a moment.
Okay.
Before we do you have any last thought that you want to share about any of this stuff?
Just my biggest encouragement to couples is to really start communicating, talking, working together. Have a marriage checkup. This is something Austin and I do pretty regularly. Even though I feel like we have a pretty good relationship, we still just check in on each other and say, hey, how's our sex life? How do you feel we're doing in communication or whatever area, and we allow the other person to have that conversation and get those conversations going. You don't have to tackle every problem in the marriage right away, but just try to tackle one.
Try to be aware of where you're at with each other and what's going on, the dynamics and nuances of your marriage. And when you were saying that, Keely, the picture that I saw was a chain. And you know the old adage, a chain is only as good as its weakest link. So almost like to check in with each other and try to identify, like if I could say to Sherry, babe, if our marriage was a chain, or our relationship is a chain, what do you think is the weakest link for us right now? And she might say, well, I feel like it has something to do with spirituality. I feel like, we almost never pray together. That would be meaningful to me. Or she might say, I feel like you've been too busy and I need quality time, and I feel like we just haven't spent that much time together. So try to identify that weakest link, because that's the weakest link at that time. And if you can communicate about that, it helps you understand maybe, hey, the area that we need to work on right now.
And it's always going to change. So that's why you have to do it regularly.
So it's a moving target. Relationship is a moving target, and it's an evolution, and things will be changing. If I could put you on the spot as we close here, Do you have a favorite verse or a Bible verse that occurs to you that would be complementary to this concept of Valentine's Day, or keeping it hot, or spicing it up, trying to be creative and move toward one another and make a special time, and let your spouse know that they're special to you? Does a Bible verse occur to you?
Song of Solomon 7 verses, well, basically the entire chapter. I really like this because they, both of these lovers are just talking back and forth to one another about their bodies, and they're celebrating their bodies. And in verse 10, the wife says, or verse 11, she says, "Come, my love, let's go to the field. Let's spend the night among the henna blossoms. Let's go early to the vineyards. Let's see if the vine has budded, if the blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give my love to you. The mandrakes give off fragrance, and at our doors is every delicacy, new as well as old. I have treasured them up for you, my love." And I think that Bible verse just really speaks to a woman's heart, that she wants her husband to come along with her and experience life. And she wants to experience sexual intimacy with him amidst all of that. And that's what I get out of those verses.
Awesome. That's really good, Keely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you for being with us for these 2 episodes. You guys, we've had Keely Reason, and I want you to go check out her websites at lovehopeadventure.com and IamTheSexTalkLady.com if you'd like more information about who Keely is and what she does, and many of her awesome resources and articles and blogs and sex games and all kinds of neat stuff that she has. So, Keely, you're totally awesome. Thank you for being with us on the Power of Purity podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, God bless you. And guys, I just bless you. In Jesus' name, I hope these episodes have been encouraging to you. And I just encourage you guys, just keep moving forward. Don't give up. Wherever you're at in your marriage, in your relationship with your spouse, whatever the temperature is, just move forward with God's grace and mercy. There's hope, there's healing, there's redemption. God has good things for us. God's grace is powerful. God's mercy is powerful. God's forgiveness and healing and redemption are powerful. The light of God comes into the dark places of our lives. The peace of God comes into the places where we're tormented. The freedom of God comes forward in the places where we've been held in captivity. The template of the gospel teaches us that God is so awesome that He can bring something back to life that used to be dead. Jesus was dead, and He rose from the dead 3 days later. That's what the gospel is, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Anyway, God bless you guys. There's hope in God, so be encouraged. Don't give up. And God's going to bless your marriage, and you're going to move forward in Jesus' name. So thanks for being with me, you guys. God bless you. God bless you, Keely. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.